Yeah, I mean, I wrote down in my notes. So how would Tony and Mikko finally get A's to self-prospect? And it's money. It says money here. That's basically what it says.
It's the bane of every AE. It's the dream of every CEO. But those two things usually never come together. No. You know, I've asked this question, my VP of sales, so many times, like, why aren't they just, I see them sitting there chatting. I see them. Why can't they do some self-prospecting now?
Yeah.
And then it's always very complicated reasons why it doesn't work.
No, we haven't trained the guys in Sales Loft. It's not gonna work out.
Today's episode is brought to you by Everstage, the top-rated platform to automate sales commissions. You can create a single hub for your reps to track all their deals, earnings, and performance history, thanks to Everstage's seamless integration with Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, Slack, and MS Teams. Reps can also know exactly how much they could earn with Crystal, Everstage's one-of-a-kind commission forecasting module. Visit everstage.com to learn more and help your sales teams ace 2025. And now, enjoy the show.
And I think the avid listener, which in this case is my co-host, I think he's listening. Yes, I have a bit of the sniffles going on. It's kind of crazy because now it's every time summer or spring truly approaches and the weather is awesome, then you get sick. It's not like when winter is insane, there's a blizzard outside, then you're like then it's just the flu and you're completely knocked out. But the sniffles, like always now.
No, but it's like, you go outside, you think like, oh, it's sunny outside. That's great. Let me just kind of put on my thin jacket, my spring jacket. And then you go outside and it's really, really cold. Like really cold right now. It's so many times that it just hit me. I walked outside like without gloves or something. I was like, oh, actually, let me get my gloves right now, please,
And then you see your kid when you pick him up at school who's running barefoot outdoor in a t-shirt. It's like, Dad, I was really hot. I just need to be outside for a minute. It's like, shut up. put on a goddamn shirt.
Next week, I have an ear infection. It's like,
it's exactly.
Where did this come from?
I can really feel like I've become a parent. It's like, put on your clothes. I mean, listen to me. I decide what goes. I make the rules. It's like, oh my God. It's terrible. Absolutely terrible.
So
that was the intro. That's done. Thanks so much for listening. By the way, if you were going to enjoy this episode, don't forget to just hit pause and then like, subscribe, share, review. It helps us grow this show. Really do appreciate it. I mean, we're doing this just out of the goodwill of our heart. Really. That's why we're doing it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's maybe a little bit of like hanging out together and kind of just hitting record, but otherwise it's a sad reality here,
Well, at one point we had good old Bart, who helped produce the show in the background. He did like, what would this show look like with AI? And it was basically the two of us sitting at a bar with a beer, which is just encapsulated perfect. And I think you're right. This is like a reason to catch up. That's kind of what it is. And speaking of catching up, one of the things we wanted to catch up was actually self-prospecting. We've talked a bit about this in the past. We've had some, let's say, opinions and feelings about this, whether AE should do it or not and all this stuff. I think one of the interesting pieces at the moment is there's so much transformation happening, right? There's so much transformation happening with all this AI tech going on. I think that the dream you and I discussed briefly that everyone is salivating over is, can we get rid of the SDR team now and just not need to spend that payroll anymore and, just have the AEs? What do you think there?
And the answer is no.
Damn it.
No, doesn't work. and let me rephrase this a little bit. There was a lot of hype around the AI SDRs. Yeah. I think they've largely squandered that hype. Yeah. I think people are more and more waking up. It's like, it doesn't work out. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And while we all had this idea, it's like, oh wow, if we get the pipeline delivered to us, maybe the AE can just do the full sales cycle, and maybe the AE can even do onboarding and support because hey, we have AI for that. And so far, the true reality is like, none of that actually kind of turns out to be correct.
So what you're saying, nothing truly comes easy in life. There's no like passive pipeline gen happening. Really.
So I mean, this is what we've all been trying to sell each other. It's like, hey, you know what? This AI thing is just going to completely revolutionize everything. And in 2025, 70% of the go-to-market is going to be, AI. Nod to Jaco, who is also going to be done on the show soon again. I think, right?
Yeah. He is coming back. He's coming back. And I think we're going to talk a bit with him on this stuff because I think one of the interesting pieces is, funny enough, I think even though there's going to be tech that reduces the need for sellers, like the amount of sellers you need, it's also just going to increase the amount of salespeople on the team in a happy coincidence. I do believe to a degree, if we as an industry can square this thing where you don't really need SDRs, you can have AEs with technology that a go-to-market engineer provides, by the way, have them actually build the pipeline. I think that would be pretty awesome, to be honest.
Yes.
Not having that SDR team, having someone own the full customer journey until close, that would be cool.
Absolutely. And for everyone that's not able to live in this pipe dream yet, we were thinking to maybe do an episode on, okay, what are some really good old tested things that just work? And what's the problem with those?
Yeah.
And the one that we sunk our teeth into is self-prospecting.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
It's the bane of every AE. It's the dream of every CEO. But those two things usually never come together. No. You know, I've asked this question, my VP of sales, so many times, like, why aren't they just, I see them sitting there chatting. I see them. Why can't they do some self-prospecting now?
Yeah.
And then it's always very complicated reasons why it doesn't work. Then I addressed this issue, obviously, with my RevOps team. And they came up with like whatever the F they came up with. And none of it worked. Like zilch.
No, we haven't trained the guys in Sales Loft. It's not going to work out.
That's what it is.
We can't do
that's
it.
What it is.
But it is funny why they're not motivated, to just self-motivated to go and do this, right? I wonder why they aren't just doing that, actually.
Yeah, I mean the obvious answer is like it sucks, right?
Yeah, totally.
Building pipelines sucks really hard, and no one wants to do it. And especially when you have an SDR team on payroll, it's like that's the moment where all AEs stop. So I rolled out an SDR team to a team once, and it was a healthy self-prospecting culture. And guess what stopped with the first SDR joining on the first day? Gone.
Not my job anymore. I'm not going to do it.
We have now a shrub that does that for us.
Yeah.
And we were kind of trying to think, and we scout the web, we talked to some people, we saw some stuff on LinkedIn. We were like, hey, those are some good examples on maybe how you can finally get the self-prospecting thing done.
I was just going to say, by the way, just interjecting a kid story here, because it's the equivalent of my oldest son, who's still like, can you make me a sandwich? And it's like, well, you are old enough to make it yourself now. It's like that kind of like, I've been used to you always feeding me. Now I have to do it myself. What the heck is going on here? So what we wanted to do we wanted to look at some of the incentives that folks can create in order to finally get those AEs to self-prospect.
Yep.
And what is like the number one incentive we're going to go for here?
So let's start with the realization that people really don't want to do it. Like kind of that's clear.
Yeah.
Number two, reps are incentivized on closed-won business, doing pipe gen that sometimes is 3 to 6 months before they see money from that.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Like humanity-wise, it's difficult to kind of get this in. And then let's also appreciate the other thing, that they're kind of in charge of the pipeline itself, and there's some gamification they can very easily do, right? So let's just keep those things in mind and kind of bring them up when they are applicable. But the first one, super simple stuff, to simply give them a higher commission rate for self-sourced deals.
Yeah.
Very straightforward, right? So you kind of have your pipeline generated by inbound and SDRs, and maybe you commission this at the normal rate, I don't know, 8, 9, 10% or something like this. And for everything that is self-sourced, you give a commission that is considerably higher than that, maybe 12, 13, 14, 15, 16%. So kind of almost double up the commission on these things, right? There are also tricks here where you can basically say, we'll give you maybe bigger quota relief, right? So let's just say you close a deal for 100K, maybe that's 10% of your target for the quarter. If you self-source it, maybe you get a quota relief of 150K and so forth, right? Kind of, you can play with those things. Some of that gets a little bit mathy, so let's not go into the details, into the weeds of this. But what I've seen is reps have like 2 different levers to pull sometimes, and the quota relief one feels better to them very often. Feels much better to them, actually, right? So kind of consider this.
But it's like
that's kind of the
risk,
very
right?
easy, straightforward one. Sorry, Mikkel?
And it's because it's reducing risk for them. Basically,
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
I think a lot of motivation for 80% of the reps out there is hitting target.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it's connected to money in the bank account, but it's also connected to not getting fired. So it's downside protection basically, right? So if you give a little bit more quota relief for self-sourced stuff, that will help you. You need to watch out, because suddenly you have, let me, close loose this inbound and open it tomorrow again as a self-prospected deal. And then see there, I have now a self-prospected deal. So there you need to watch out with the gaming. And then you also, especially if you go into the quota relief stuff, you need to do the math a little bit, because what you don't want to have is everyone is hitting target, but the company, And so you need to be a bit careful with these things. But generally speaking, those two items, like higher commission or quota relief on self-prospected stuff, money, that's something these guys like.
I think it's like always been the case with incentives. Like you shouldn't build them with the fear of folks gaming it. It's gonna happen no matter how you build them, I think, these kind of incentives. And that at the end of the day, one of the points that do matter a great deal, other than obviously monitoring it, is also that it's kind of simple. Like it has to be kind of simple for people to understand, and they can feel that they can actually impact it. And I think one of the interesting pieces you said is like, if you have a sales cycle of just 3 months, and then you also need to book it yourself, you're looking at 6 months. That is a long time. That is a very long time for someone. And I think there's like been psychological studies that just show humans are really terrible at this stuff. If you look at, they have one that's classic, I think, with kids, where they ask them, hey, do you want to have the candy now, or do you want to have 2 pieces of candy in an hour? And most of them are like, oh, I'll take the candy now. Thank you very much, right? And it's the same dynamic here.
Which is exactly the next point, actually, right? Kind of try and build some incentives around pipeline generation instead of only on close winning the deal, but also on pipe gen. And the idea here could be that, I don't know, maybe you have a $1 million target, and maybe you need to have $2 or $3 million of pipeline for that, or equivalents of, right? You could basically say, okay, a decent portion of that, 10%, 20%, 30%, that should be the self-gen target, right? Yeah. And based on that target being reached, you can then pay out a bonus. Yeah. You would basically say, okay, if you reach 30% self-gen of your pipeline that you need to generate to kind of get to your target, you get a bonus of $5,000. If you get to even more than that, maybe 50%, you get a bonus of $15,000 on top, right?
Yeah.
Kind of those can very quickly be very considerable numbers. And what that does is it turns the focus a little bit away from reps saying like, hey, I only want to source the deals that will close. And no one is really an expert in that. And then kind of moves it towards let's just source deals and create pipeline and create more at-bats and kind of get me in front of folks more often, so I can try and kind of win those deals, right? And it also creates a more consistent behavior, right? Kind of where you really try every quarter again and again and again, try and unlock that additional, spiff, basically, or money piece, and then kind of sets you up, in 6 months down the line when those deals actually materialize, that you actually have a nice, pipeline going for you.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a almost gamification to a degree, right? You have those different kind of incentives you can unlock if you do the right work, right? How do you, maybe this is off track and maybe this is one of those we do cut out, but how do you build this into the process of the AE? And maybe this is like a follow-up episode we need to do once you get them self-prospecting, because I guess the overriding directive number 1 is close deals, period, end of story. If they're not closing deals, company dies, right? So that's the number 1 priority. And then number 2 will be book more opportunities. Right. So how do you structure this best? Is there like a rule of thumb or anything?
So I'm not sure about the rule of thumb, but if you think about it, and he actually walks around with a tremendous amount of knowledge about, his or her old deals. And we know like maybe you have a 20% close rate, meaning every quarter you have 80% deals that are close lost.
Yeah.
But those deals are not throw them out the window style.
No.
Those deals have value, right? So if you have a stronger self-prospecting culture in the AE team, what will happen is that they're like, oh no, actually this deal over there that closed loss in Q1, I know there's going to be something in Q3, so let me kind of reach out and kind of book something in Q2, right?
Yeah.
Instead of hoping or waiting that some SDR picks this up. Yeah. Another one is like, oh, look at this. This guy jumped over to another company. I had a really great connection with him. Let me ping him and just catch up and let's see what's going on and then try and build something out of this. Right. And then the last one I would say is, when you win a deal, ask for a referral.
Yeah.
Like ask them, right? You can even do this on deals that you're losing for the right reasons. You can ask them like, hey, do you know anyone else that would be interested, right? And if you have a strong self-prospecting culture, those are mini tactics you can deploy, but they are hurtful still, right? You need to ask and someone will say no and so forth, and it takes time. So in order to get them to be incentivized to kind of take that time and take that effort, that's kind of where the incentives come in, right? And kind of almost jumping into the next one, which is a little bit in connection to some of the pipeline sourcing stuff. You can also, refine this a little bit more and create some kind of a payout that is structured around those deals progressing, right? So let's just say you not only get the first meeting, but maybe you get them to discovery done or kind of negotiate and so forth. So even before they are done in terms of, signature signed and so forth, you can think about paying some kind of commission on those deals as they progress through the funnel, right? Again, it would only be on self-sourced deals. And, this can be a small amount, like a percentage or something like this, that you pay already as those deals progress. Now, what you need to have in place for that is a very strong pipeline process, right? Kind of, it doesn't work that people can put all the self-prospected deal into negotiation immediately after they book them. That would be gaming the system kind of too much. You need to have a good process that, polices this and safeguards this to a degree. But again, why would you do it? Well, you're doing it because you want to create an incentive that hits earlier than when they win the deal, right? You want to find those ways to kind of get that benefit faster than at the end of the full deal cycle.
The thing is, the questions I have and the question I have now is kind of going off script again. Like,
do that.
All of a sudden you have, look, these are great incentives, hands down. And I think we're going to cover a few more before this episode is obviously done. But it also created some kind of competition between the SDR and AE, right? Those tactics you listed out of the AE reaching out to previous closed lost deals, closed won deals, etc. Those were plays SDRs used to do, right? So how's that going to work out? Are you potentially in some cases going to kneecap the SDRs a bit? There's something internally to navigate, I guess, here on who does what, I guess. For me, by the way, it makes complete sense. You have someone who had maybe a demo, spend an hour on a call with someone and follow-ups, that they are the ones reaching out again and not someone new. I think for the buyer in that situation, it makes a lot of sense. It also makes sense that it's not marketing needs to get the credit, so they're sending an email and doing all kinds of things. Like, no. Try and get on the phone, try and get a hold of them.
So what it's going to create is basically your SDR performance will go down. Because in many, many organizations, or will be more real, let's just call it like it is. It will be more real. In many organizations where you have kind of strong also connections between the SDR and the AE, you will have situations where the AE is like, hey, call this guy. You know, I know they're ready. Just call him up and then hit him over to me. Yeah. Those deals suddenly will be self-prospecting, right? So there will be, to a degree, some deals that the organization net-wise won't gain, right? Yeah. Because they're now just attributed to the other person. Yeah. But what does really happen here? Number one, the SDR now is like, oh shit, I'm 2 deals behind target now. I need to push in order to kind of get those 2 deals. Yeah. So that's where you kind of have the net gain again. And the other piece is like, well, now that the E is starting to think in this realm, kind of let's keep thinking, keep executing in this realm, then you will have a net gain overall, right? Yeah. But you will have, I don't want to say sharper elbows, but you will have less grease between the SDR and the AE. But going maybe with the next one here, which I think is really interesting. So basically tie the incentive around hitting a prospecting target that then creates a commission boost for all the deals in their pipeline. Yeah. Meaning, yes, you need to get to 20-30% self-prospecting with your pipeline, or you can tie it to closed won deals from self-prospecting. And if you hit that, if the AE actually hits that milestone, he will get an accelerator on all deals that he or she has closed, right? Kind of really making this really interesting. And you can even do it as not only a kicker, kind of a bump, you can also do it as a ding. But that activates in the other direction. If they only achieve less than the target, this might actually then generate a drop across all the different deals that they have done, right? Kind of really, really upping the stakes for them. And I think, and this is a dangerous one to play with, but it's the more powerful one, is taking stuff away. Taking stuff away kind of creates all kinds of upsets. but it's also the way more powerful, motivator in many cases. And this is proven by psychology, right? Kind of gaining $100 gives you way less pleasure than losing $100 hurts you, right? And kind of tapping into that would be something like this here.
Yeah. I think we also covered pieces of this in the past with comp plans as well. It is super important to think about the dynamics and just quite frankly, the experience that the seller is going to have as they go through some of these situations. And I think playing through hey, what would it look like if Greg has a tough quarter with this new model? What will that look like? And what's going to happen potentially versus what if he has a great quarter? What does that look like? I think part of that also matters a great deal for sure.
No, absolutely. Another one. And, again, we're playing with the same levers, but like in different, tricky, nice ways of kind of thinking about it. So if you, for example, give them a self-sourcing pipeline target, you can use it to adjust their target in general. So let's just say someone was self-sourcing 50% of their pipeline. Maybe their target stays at $1 million, right? Yeah. And this makes sense. If you're spending so much time on self-gen, maybe you don't have so many deals. Maybe you that's the reason. By the way, as a unit and as unit economics kind of around this will be so much more efficient than any of the other things that kind of have around, like hands down, right? So taking the quota down for this rep, if they kind of self-source so much, is making you lots of money, actually thinking about it. And then the reverse can also be true. If that person doesn't hit that self-gen target, you can actually increase the pipeline, which also makes sense because these guys rely a lot more on SDRs, rely a lot more on inbounds. They consume a lot more resources that are basically coming into that, into that P&L, that individual P&L of an AE. And in order for that P&L to work out and be positive, CAC payback positive, so to speak, they actually need to hit higher, right? And again, the logic here is, you can also reverse it. And it's like, well, if you do self-prospecting, we take down your quota. This one is actually more powerful and will be more accepted, I think, because you basically can do the math with them on a sheet of paper and say like, well, if you rely on so much outside help, and you burn through all of those resources, your target has to go up for this to work out, right?
Would you actually let them choose? Like, would you have a mix of AEs, some that do self-prospecting and some that don't, with variance in their quota?
I think you can set it up like this, but the way this is here being thought of is you have all these AEs going into one direction, but then there are different accelerators that they individually can opt into, for example, right? And by the way, I wouldn't recommend using all of them. I think that's too old. There's like that, I wouldn't do that. But, some of them might kind of ring very, very true for you guys.
Yeah. It's like making a pizza. It's like, so there's ham, tuna, cheese, butter, chili. It's a lot. It's nasty. It's not going to work. So do you have more? Do you have another incentive for us?
I have more, man. I have more. So another one is, think about it as team-based incentives, right? So you don't have a round robin. So round robin is you have a team of 10 SDRs, they book meetings, they throw them over into an AE, and then they do stuff. I think that works in some instances, it doesn't work in many others. So I really like a pairing or potting kind of approach where this is a little bit more intimate, kind of you know each other. And here it could be that an account is being sourced by an AE because maybe they know kind of who that is and so forth, right? But the deal is being booked by an SDR. And this is how you get around this, previous issue that we kind of mentioned where kind of suddenly you start to have the elbows come out.
Yeah.
Here you actually encourage this kind of working together and basically say, well, the AE and SDR are working together on those set of accounts and both get a benefit from doing this in the first place, right? And then you would basically say like, if this then kind of turns into a deal, then maybe both into an opportunity, both the AE and the SDR get a benefit from that, like a cash benefit kind of directly there, right?
Yeah.
Again, you need to police and look at this and make sure it's not being gamed. But ultimately what you wanna incentivize here is this team thinking, right? Because many times it is also very time consuming to do the reach out and do all of that work. And I think it makes sense if you have like, hey, Gary, I know him. He's now at this new gig. I just need to kind of ping him once and I have a meeting set up. And then there might be a couple of other accounts where like, hey, we would be a good fit. But all the legwork and, figuring out who to call and, whom to send what and so forth, that still needs to be done. That part of the work, you would basically kind of rely more on an SDR. And then having this collaboration of like a shared account list almost, that is then the behavior you want to incentivize.
So I actually have a few questions that I think maybe we need to cover them also just before we potentially run out of time, because you have a lot of great potential incentives. I'm betting you have more on the list. I just got to ask on behalf of the listener, right? Let's say there's a scenario now where they're like, okay, yes, we should look at some incentives for these AEs to start self-prospecting. We have a pod with 2 SDRs and 1 AE. Collectively, they're booking, let's keep it simple, 10 ops per SDR. So that's 20 a month. And now we want to encourage self-prospecting. How do you figure out what the number should then be? Because it's obviously meetings booked to a degree matters a great deal here. How much time should the AEs potentially be sinking into this? Do you have any kind of reflections on this?
So there are a couple of ways to kind of look at this. The best case and the luxury problem case is like, oh, you not only have 20 SDR meetings, but suddenly you have maybe another 10 or 15 being sourced by the AEs. Like, who's going to take all those demos? Like best case problem, by the way. And I can tell you as much that I've never met an AE that says like, you know what, don't send me more meetings. Like, just don't do it. Like that.
They will just work overtime.
It basically never happens, right? It's kind of having too many meetings is a great thing. What should you be putting into your Excel spreadsheet from day one? Well, maybe nothing. Just leave this as a play, as a tactic. And what does help, and we've been tracking this a lot, previously, is just have a line item for what self-prospecting looks like, and then just pull this forward. Just take the average of that and keep expecting this going forward. And you might be wrong, you might be right with this, right? There might be some outliers that are doing this a lot, and then maybe that person leaves and suddenly it completely breaks away. But this will be your best indication there.
But you wouldn't consider doing almost a, let's say, proof of concept test with a pod and say, hey, now we're going to let you do self-prospect. We want you to self-prospect. You're going to get these incentives in order to do so. And then kind of monitor and see, hey, what can we realistically expect? Because it's also adding additional cost with the incentives.
So that's right. I think if what you're rolling out fundamentally changes behavior, like changes the process and so forth, and you're not quite sure if the process is going to be right for you or if it's going to break things, try and test it out. Many of those incentives we're going through, you can just throw them in there for a quarter, make a big thing out of it, see what happens, and then take it from there, right? I think some of them are very low commitment, actually.
So I'm just wondering, sorry to cut you off again, but I'm just wondering, when you're testing also this stuff, it's like you're testing basically my commission, my income now. How do you manage testing on the commission level? So it's kind of, let's say, I guess you want to take some risk off for the AEs, to be honest.
So as long as you're testing, and this is from an AE perspective, because you're asking a question like this, as long as you're testing in the positive realm only, everyone will be fine.
They will love it. It's like
okay, I have the chance to get more, my only downside is to get the same. I'm okay with that. I think where it gets way more tricky is when you do some of the negative accelerators, like, oh, you didn't hit this and therefore that. I think the way you would do it actually is you would start incentivizing behavior in a positive way. Where it basically is a net gain for everyone. And then once you start seeing, okay, this is working, or this is the baseline we can expect from people that are really picking this up, then you can start like, okay, well, if you don't do it at all, you get a negative ticket. And then next quarter, if you don't do 10%, you get a negative. And then, like, you kind of ramp it in there. And then the conversation with the AEs is pretty straightforward. It's like, well, everyone else around here is doing this stuff. You're the only one not doing it. So, it's up to you, my friend. Right? I think another very simple one, and I've done this myself actually many times, is to keep it really simple and just pay like a fee, a bonus for a new opportunity generated. Like just do that. And we've done this in terms of spiffs and sprints. And the last month of the quarter, maybe that's a bad idea for an AE spiff, but like in the first month or second month of the quarter, just kind of hey, book a meeting, you get some money. Again, you need to watch out because, they're all fully in charge of what is a meeting, what is a pipeline. And you want to make sure that they're not completely gaming the system for you, right? And I would even say like maybe cap it at 4 to 5 meetings a quarter. If they had reached 10, great, give them another thing on top, but don't make it like an endless thing. Because otherwise, you can make a lot of money just from that. And what is messy is, and that's happened to me already. People are really gaming this and then almost like having, legally speaking, everything on their side. It's like, no, this was a meeting. It was booked by me. It qualifies as these meetings because maybe there's no definition. And now try and fuck with me,
Yeah.
And so you want to be careful around this, and you want to have some language around protecting yourself maybe from that.
I think a cool thing I saw, by the way, on these almost spiffs, it's a while back, I gotta say, but someone took, I think it was the founder, took a picture of like a regional SDR team. And they were like, I want to say 10 people or something sitting in an island together, booking meetings. And above them, from the ceiling, were hanging 3 things. I forget all of them, but one of them was like I want to say a $5,000 gift certificate for travel. Like, so they could buy a holiday. Yeah. And it's, they clearly had a spiff where it's like they could sit and watch those gifts as they came into office and sat down to hustle and work. And it's just, one thing is just, it's also more motivating to a degree that it's a physical thing versus money sometimes changes the dynamic a little bit. I mean, this is its own episode, but I was just like, dang, that was a cool incentive as well to have.
I know of a team out of Berlin, actually. And Berlin is like actually more sales Wild West than many people think.
So sausages they had hanging? No.
Yeah, that's what it was. Or insert other German joke. Go.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, but they actually had was, in Squid Games, there's this bowl of money that hangs in the ceiling.
Yeah. No way, they didn't do that.
They had a bowl, but like there was a sphere, kind of a plexiglass sphere, not with cash. Like that's maybe a little bit too dicey, but with smaller like items like an iPhone, earpods,
love it.
Stuff like that was basically kind of in there. And then whenever someone kind of achieved something, could just grab it and take some and walk away with it. So visualizing some of these things also, that's very old school, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
Who'd have thought? But I mean, for all the cool hipsters out there, you would need an office first for that because it doesn't jive that well just as a.
Guys, if you squint your eye or zoom in on the screen here in our Zoom call, you can see. Yeah.
Yes. And maybe then the last one. So this is going out to especially bigger deals. I've seen the AE self-sourcing, that stuff is actually just more viable, right?
Yeah.
And having some SDR trying to call into, I don't know, a VP, a big organization, like sometimes you need the gravitas, but like a bit more experience and being a grown up and like, that appearance as an AE in order to even get the first meeting, right? To even make this phone call, this cold call work out. It might not be the person that is, out of uni for 2 years or something like this. It might be someone else. And then basically the incentive here is to say like, hey, if you close big self-source deals, we just double your commission. Just double it. Kind of. And that obviously has 2 really cool incentives for the rep. Is like, well, it's not only it's only for the big deals. Yeah. And it doubles the commission, So it's double plus, right? Yeah. Kind of, it's like, let's totally fucking do that. So, and I think, and we're coming to the end of my list here, those are things I feel where if you mix and match, take some of these things in, you need some policing in place. I'm sorry, right? You have to, but also to a degree, you need to kind of trust the process. If you put some of these things together, and this is like real world stuff, then I think it's going to be possible for you to drive some change in behavior, because that's all what it is. It doesn't, there's no much like training and coaching and stuff. No, they just need to actually do it. They know exactly what to do because they've been in SDR before and they just don't want to do it anymore. And you just need to give them compelling reasons why to do it. And those compelling reasons, they're just so many of them. One is more commission, smaller target, and or money earlier.
Yeah,
like those are the 3 basically, and we kind of had a couple of mixing and matching of those to make it more tangible for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down in my notes. So how would Tony and Mikko finally get A's to self prospects? And it's money. It says money here. That's basically what it says. But it's true. It's kind of also, it's a big part of the sales realm. It always has been, and probably will be for a while until the AI.
Speaking of self-prospecting, if you are trying to reach an audience that is go-to-market leaders in like Europe and the US, kind of companies usually 5-10 million plus in ARR, we might be a great sponsorship partner for you. So if you hear this and want to maybe explore this, kick this over to your marketing guy or lady, and then let's have that conversation. But otherwise, hit subscribe, like, and everything else. Send it maybe to a friend of yours if they are already currently struggling with this. And thank you, Mikkel, so much for today's episode.
Thank you, Tony. Take care.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.